The soft squeak of glass cleaner echoed across the polished wooden table. The scent of lemon disinfectant lingered in the air, cold and crisp like a reminder. Everything here must be perfect, even the hands that touch it. Sarah bent down her latex-gloved hands, moving rhythmically as she wiped away an imaginary trace of dust from the long dining table. The crystal chandelier cast reflections on her pale blonde hair, creating a soft glow she despised because it made the fatigue in her eyes impossible to hide. Beyond the massive glass windows, New York City was drowning in rain. Droplets slid down the surface like they were trying to escape falling toward the world of those below, the ones who didn't live among the clouds like the master of this place. It had been 6 months since Sarah became the maid of the 68th floor. 6 months since she'd chosen to disappear into the glittering light of Liam Anderson, a man both feared and admired by all of Manhattan. They called him the Silver Lion for his dark hair streaked with gray and eyes as cold as steel. In the papers, he was a powerful businessman. In the shadows, he was someone everyone either owed a debt to or feared to cross. To Sarah, he was something else entirely, a secret she could never afford to reveal. Her hand drifted instinctively to her belly, a habit she no longer noticed. 5 months. It had been 5 months since that night she found out she was pregnant. 5 months of fear tangled with the desperate longing to touch a memory again. A memory of that fateful night when she met him for the first time. Under a false name with a sincere smile, he had told her he was just Liam from Boston, a kind stranger. Just one night, but enough to change everything. Sarah had never imagined fate could be this cruel. The man she thought was a miracle turned out to be the most dangerous man in New York's underworld. And now she worked in his home wiping tables, washing glasses, cleaning the life of the man who had unknowingly fathered her child. Sarah, the West Wing, isn't done yet. The sharp voice of Mrs. Norris, the head housekeeper, came from the doorway. The woman had served the Anderson family for nearly 30 years, and her discipline was legendary. "Mr. Anderson has guests tonight. Don't be late." "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied, lowering her head to hide the tremor in her voice. When the sound of Mrs. Norris's heels faded, Sarah straightened and looked out the window. The city stretched beneath her like a carpet of light, endless and indifferent. For a fleeting moment, she felt absurdly small, an invisible speck in a universe of glass and gold. Then, ding! The private elevator chimed. She turned, and the world fell silent. Liam Anderson stepped out without his usual entourage of guards. The light reflected off the charcoal gray suit tailored perfectly to his tall frame. His hair was slightly tousled, as if from a long day of meetings. But his eyes, those sharp storm gray eyes, still had the same piercing focus that made her heart stumble. He didn't see her immediately. Liam set his briefcase on the table, removed his watch, and rolled up his sleeves. Every movement radiated calm authority, the kind of control only a man used to commanding the world could possess. Then his gaze found her. 1 second. 2. "Are you new here?" he asked, voice deep and slightly rough, the kind that carried power even in its quiet. No, sir. I've been here for 6 months. His brow furrowed slightly, curiosity flickering in his eyes. 6 months? Yes, Mr. Anderson. He stepped closer. Each stride made the air feel thicker. Sarah kept her head low, trying to steady her breathing. "What's your name, Sarah Lawson?" A pause. "Lawson?" he repeated, tasting the word. "Sounds familiar." She pressed her lips together, her heart pounding. "Perhaps you've met others with the same name." A faint smile ghosted his lips. Not quite belief, not quite doubt. "Perhaps." He brushed a finger along the spotless surface of the table she'd just cleaned. "Good. You're thorough." "Thank you, sir." "Keep it that way." His tone stayed even. "I don't like people touching my things without permission." Sarah bowed slightly. Only when he disappeared into his private room did she dare exhale. Cold sweat clung to her back. Her hand instinctively tightened around her stomach. He hadn't recognized her, or he wasn't sure yet. That night, the rain still poured over the city. Sarah returned to her tiny Brooklyn apartment, a cramped space she shared with her best friend Lily. The ceiling leaked, the paint peeled, but it was the only place she felt safe. Lily looked up from the TV as Sarah entered. "You're late again. Don't tell me your boss made you stay overtime." "No," Sarah managed a weak smile. "Just extra cleaning. He's expecting guests." "Guests or a lover?" Lily teased, raising an eyebrow. Sarah said nothing. Lily sighed, then asked quietly, "Sarah, have you thought about it? The baby. Are you really going to keep hiding it?" Sarah stared at her hands, voice barely above a whisper. "If he finds out, it's over." "You don't understand, Lily. He's not the kind of man who forgives lies." "But you didn't lie." "It doesn't matter who's right or wrong," Sarah said softly. "What matters is power. He owns the world, and I only have this child." Lily fell silent, worry clouding her eyes. "At least think about leaving," she urged. "Go somewhere far, Boston, California, anywhere he can't reach." Sarah shook her head. "He can find anyone, anywhere." The next morning, something felt different in the penthouse. Mrs. Norris met Sarah at the door, finger to her lips. "Mr. Anderson's home early, emergency meeting. Keep quiet." Sarah nodded and slipped into the kitchen, starting her routine. But as she wiped the counter, a deep voice spoke behind her, so close, so familiar, it froze her blood. "You haven't had breakfast yet, have you?" "Sarah?" She turned. Liam stood there, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, holding a mug of coffee. The sunlight streaming through the window made his gray eyes look darker, deeper. "No, sir. I'm not hungry." He studied her, his gaze lingering from her tired face down to the hand resting lightly on her belly. A long look, long enough for her to feel the air tighten. "You should eat," he said slowly. "Working on an empty stomach isn't good for your health, especially in your condition." Her heart stopped. "My condition?" He took a sip of coffee, lips curving slightly. "You look pale." "I was only expressing concern." Sarah lowered her gaze, her pulse racing. "Thank you, sir. No need. I just don't want my employees fainting on the job." He set the mug down and stepped closer. Too close. She could smell his cologne, woodsy and dark, mingling with the faint bitterness of coffee. "Sarah Lawson," he murmured, eyes never leaving hers. "That name, I'm sure I've heard it before." "You must be mistaken, sir," she replied, forcing calm. "Maybe." His lips curved, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Though I rarely make mistakes." Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing, frozen heart racing out of rhythm. That night when Sarah came home, Lily was already asleep. She stood before the mirror, hand on her belly, feeling the tiny flutter of life inside. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "we have to be strong. Everything will be okay. I promise." But then, headlights flashed through the window. A black car stopped on the street below. A man leaned against it, cigarette glowing red in the rain. Sarah froze. No, it couldn't be. She pulled the curtain aside just enough to see him look up. Even from several stories above, those eyes pierced through the storm cold, sharp and searching. Liam Anderson's eyes. She stumbled back, breath caught in her throat. Did he already know? If you've ever believed a secret could stay buried forever, wait until the person who once made your heart tremble looks into your eyes again. Part 2. The fateful night will reveal what really happened that night. Stay tuned. This love story is only beginning. That night, it also rained in New York. Rain fell in silver streaks against the tall glass towers, reflecting the golden haze of a lavish gala, where Sarah was nothing more than an invisible shadow at the edge of it all. She was working as a waitress at the Harrington Charity Gala, an event people attended not out of kindness, but for reputation. Glittering crystal gowns, smiles that knew their own worth, and champagne laughter as polished as the marble floors. Sarah stood behind the bar, dressed in a plain black dress, holding a tray of champagne flutes. She blended perfectly into the background of wealth and vanity, exactly the way she preferred. She didn't know that night would be the one to change everything. A sharp crash shattered the air. She barely managed to tilt the tray, catching it before half a dozen crystal glasses could fall. Champagne spilled icy bubbles running over her hand. Impressive. That voice low, rough-edged, carrying the calm authority of someone unaccustomed to smiling. Sarah looked up and met the gaze that made her heart stop. The man standing before her wore a perfectly tailored black suit. His dark hair was swept neatly back, the light glinting off a sharp jawline and a pair of gray eyes like forged steel. He reached out, steadying the tray. No one reacts that fast unless they've learned how to dodge trouble. Sarah gave a faint smile. Maybe I just got lucky. No, he replied, eyes still locked on hers. I don't believe in luck. Only instinct. There was a short silence, but long enough for her to realize that his stare was unlike the drunken glances of other men here. It was deeper, colder, as if he could read every secret she was trying to hide. Thanks for saving the gala from a crystal catastrophe, he said. I'm Liam Santos, she smiled. Sarah. Just Sarah. They met again later that night. Her shift had ended, and she stepped out of the hotel into the soft drizzle. Rain clung to her coat mist curling around her hair. And there he was standing under the awning, waiting. Do you have an umbrella? He asked. No, but I'm used to the rain. Well, I'm not used to letting anyone get wet because of me. He opened a black umbrella. The streetlight above them glowed a pale gold, casting warmth over the two of them. His nearness brought a quiet heat to the cold night, enough to make her afraid to breathe too deeply. Would you like to take a walk? It was an odd invitation. Sarah hesitated. She wasn't the kind of woman who accepted offers from strangers, especially one whose eyes looked both dangerous and kind. But that night, the rain seemed to whisper yes. They walked down Fifth Avenue in silence, words falling between them like raindrops, few but meaningful. He didn't brag, didn't flatter. Instead, he asked, Do you believe in fate? Sarah smiled faintly. I believe in choices. What about choices you can't undo? She said nothing. He tilted his head, studying her as though he could see right through her calm. You seem like someone who's had to leave something behind. She looked away. Haven't we all? He smiled a fleeting, sorrowful smile. Maybe that's why I feel like I understand you. They stopped at a small cafe that stayed open through the night. Sarah ordered hot cocoa, Liam black espresso. She told him she'd once studied economics, but dropped out after her mother's death, working wherever she could since then. He listened, truly listened without pity. And you? She asked. What kind of job lets you attend galas like that? He chuckled, voice low. I'm in investments. But sometimes people invest not for profit, but for power. Sarah frowned slightly. Power isn't something you can buy. No, he said softly, his eyes darkening. It's something you trade pieces of yourself for. She didn't fully understand, but there was a sadness in his tone, a proud kind of loneliness that made her heart ache. When they left the cafe, the rain had stopped. Liam insisted on driving her home. She hesitated, but he was persuasive in a quiet, steady way. The car stopped in front of the hotel where he was staying, a place far too elegant for her to even step into. Thank you, he said as he turned to her, for giving me a normal night. Normal, she teased softly. You don't seem very normal to me. Maybe not. He stepped closer, his breath mingling with the cool air. But I'd forgotten what it's like to speak freely, to not measure every word until I met you. Sarah stood still. She knew she should walk away. But when his hand brushed hers, just a feather-light touch, a silent question, she couldn't. The hotel room on the 20th floor was bathed in dim light. No music, no champagne, just their breathing and the faint rhythm of rain returning outside. He was gentler than she expected, and she was weaker than she thought. When his fingers slid through her hair, Sarah felt time stop. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, though it was far too late. Maybe he murmured, but I've never wanted to stay anywhere more. The next morning, Sarah woke to gray dawn filtering through the curtains. Liam was gone. Only a silver lighter sat on the table engraved with the initials, L.A. She held it in her palm, still warm from the night before. No phone number, no address, no promises. Just one night. One night to remember, and the beginning of everything she couldn't forget. 2 weeks later, the pregnancy test showed 2 red lines. Sarah sat motionless on the bathroom floor, her mind blank. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. She had no money, no family, only the memory of a man who had swept through her life like a storm. His name, Liam Santos, was all she knew. But fate wasn't finished yet. A month later, as she and her friend waited at a clinic, a TV broadcast caught her attention. Anderson Holdings expands into global shipping. The young chairman Liam Anderson appears alongside senior advisors. Sarah froze. On the screen was a man in a gray suit, his unmistakable eyes that cold smile. Not a simple investor. Not Liam Santos. He was Liam Anderson, a billionaire industrialist rumored to have deep ties to the underworld. She turned off the TV, hands trembling as she clutched her belly. Inside her, the baby stirred a quiet answer from fate itself. She decided to keep the child. Not for him, but for herself. "You're the only good thing that's ever happened to me," she whispered every night. Then one day, when life finally seemed calm again, she saw a job listing housekeeper needed for Anderson Tower. Full insurance benefits? Sarah stared at the words for a long time. Her heart pounded as if destiny were reaching out to pull her back where it all began. "You can't," Lily said. "You're insane. That's his building." Sarah smiled a weary, defiant smile. "Exactly. That's why he'll never look there." And so she took the job on the 68th floor. His floor. His home. Where she cleaned the world of the man whose child she carried. Among shining mirrors gleaming wood and cold glass walls, she became a quiet ghost. No one knew who she was. No one knew she bore the secret of the city's most powerful man. Until the day he looked at her, truly looked at her. That gaze 6 months later pierced through every wall she'd built. The gaze of the man who once said he didn't believe in luck, only instinct. And this time his instinct was right. Since that night, Sarah hadn't slept peacefully again. Liam's gaze haunted her, the gray of his eyes, like a still lake before a storm reflecting something too deep, too dangerous. She had learned how to survive in his world, move quietly, bow, just enough, leave no trace. But now, every nerve in her body was taut because she knew he had started to notice. And in Liam Anderson's world, notice meant being pulled into the orbit of a black star. Tuesday morning arrived with the city wrapped in fog thick as a curtain hiding secrets. Sarah stood in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for her employer's VIP guests. The air was filled with the rich scent of Arabica coffee and warm buttered pastries, sweet yet suffocating. Mrs. Norris, the long-serving housekeeper, entered her tone brisk as ever. "Sarah, Mr. Anderson wants his coffee in his study. You'll bring it to him yourself." A simple instruction, yet it made her stomach drop. "Can't someone else?" he said, "you specifically." Sarah nodded, forcing her voice to stay calm. She poured black coffee into a white porcelain cup, steam curling upward like mist. Her hands trembled slightly, but she carried the tray upstairs. Each step down the carpeted hallway sounded in her chest like the knock of fate. The study door was ajar, the scent of cedarwood mingling with faint cigar smoke. Liam stood by the window, sleeves rolled up his white shirt catching the morning light. The silver watch on his wrist gleamed sharp like a blade. He didn't turn when she knocked. "Come in." His voice was low, steady, the kind that carried quiet command. Sarah stepped inside and set the tray on the desk. "Your coffee, Mr. Anderson?" "Black," he asked, still facing the window. "Yes, sir. No sugar? That's correct." He turned, then the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. His eyes moved over her slowly, deliberately, as though measuring each breath she took. "So you remember my preference?" Sarah froze. Such a simple statement, yet it carried an undertone that made her heart stutter. "I just followed Mrs. Norris's instructions." "No need for modesty," he replied. "You have a good memory. 6 months, isn't it? And in 6 months, no one in this household has managed to please me quite like you." He stepped closer, slow, deliberate steps that devoured the distance between them. His cologne drifted toward her amber and oak wood, the scent of power and temptation. "Sarah," he said softly, "I feel like we've met before." The words sliced through her composure, grazing the secret she had buried deep. She managed a thin smile. "I'm just a maid, sir. Maybe I remind you of someone." "Perhaps." His hand rested lightly on the edge of the desk, eyes narrowing slightly. "Still very few people manage to unsettle me the way you do." Her chest tightened. She tried to step back, but her spine met the bookshelf behind her. No escape. For a moment, Liam said nothing. Then he turned to voice calm again. "You've been working hard. I'd like to reward you." "That's not necessary, sir. I'm just doing my job." The reward isn't for the work, he said, at fingers brushing over a drawer handle. It's for honesty. He drew out a silver lighter. Sarah went still. Her heartbeat stopped for half a second. Sunlight caught the engraved initials on the metal LA, his lighter. From that night, from the past she thought she had buried forever, Liam twirled it between his fingers. I found this in storage. They said it was left behind at the Harrington Gala 8 months ago. Strange, isn't it? Tell me, Sarah, did you ever work there? The air in the room thickened. Sarah inhaled carefully. I may have served there once, sir, but I don't remember much. He arched an eyebrow, a faint smile touching his lips. Is that so? The lighter clicked open with a sharp teach. A blue flame flickered to life. Liam watched it for a moment, his tone low, almost thoughtful. Funny how the things we lose somehow find their way back. He snapped it shut and slipped it into his pocket. Then he looked straight at her. Do you plan to stay here long? Sarah, I haven't thought about it. Then you should. His voice dipped lower, cold and warm at once. I don't like replacing people until I understand them. It wasn't a threat exactly, but in Liam's world, nothing was ever said without purpose. Sarah bowed her head, murmured her thanks, and hurried out. Once the door closed, she leaned against the wall, breath shaking. Her entire body trembled as if she'd just escaped a blade's edge. That afternoon, rain returned. Sarah left the tower clutching her coat tight, her pulse still racing. The image of the silver lighter replayed in her mind like a silent warning. On the bus, her reflection in the window looked ghost-like pale skin, hollow eyes. She wondered, does he know, or was he simply playing a game she could never win? When she got home, Lily was waiting, worry etched across her face. What happened? You look like you saw a ghost. Maybe something worse. Sarah dropped her bag, sinking into the chair. He asked me. About that night. Liam, Sarah nodded. He has the lighter, Lily. That lighter. Lily swore under her breath and sat opposite her. If he's suspicious, you have to leave. Tonight. Leave where he has people everywhere. If I disappear, that'll only confirm it. Then what are you going to do? Sarah said nothing. Even she didn't know the answer. 3 days later, Liam was gone from the penthouse. Rumor said he was in Chicago meeting business partners. Yet Mrs. Norris had orders no one was to take time off. The calm before a storm always frightened Sarah most. That evening, as she was tidying the library, the intercom rang. Sarah Lawson report to the living room on the 68th floor. A man's deep-clipped voice. Marco, the head of Liam's security. Sarah swallowed hard. What is it? Mr. Anderson just returned. He wants to see you. The living room glowed with soft golden light. The fireplace crackled its warmth, contrasting the cold tension in the air. Liam sat on the sofa jacket, unbuttoned, a glass of whiskey glinting in his hand. He watched her as though waiting for a confession. Sit, he said. I'd rather stand, sir. He gave a faint shrug. As you wish. I only have a few questions. He swirled the whiskey voice slow, almost gentle. You once mentioned you studied economics, didn't you? Yes. Interesting. I need someone to review some reports from my charity foundation. You'll help me. She blinked. I'm not sure I'm qualified. I'll be the judge of that. His interruption was quiet but sharp. I like people who can keep secrets. And I think you're very good at that. Sarah's breath caught. He rose from the sofa, walking toward her, stopping just a few feet away. Sarah, he murmured, his tone soft, but laced with something dangerous. If I asked you honestly, are you hiding something from me? Their eyes met. For one suspended moment, there was no master and servant. Only two souls locked in silent battle, one guarding a secret, the other trying to unearth it. No, she said. The lie slipped out like a prayer. He tilted his head, a faint smile ghosting his lips. Good, because I don't tolerate betrayal. He turned away, setting his glass down. But his next words made her pulse falter. Marco will drive you home. Get some rest, Sarah. Tomorrow will be a long day. When she left the penthouse, she caught sight of him in the SUV's rearview mirror, standing by the window, his silhouette framed by the city lights. Even blurred by distance, his eyes glimmered sharp, deliberate. the look of a hunter who had marked his prey. Sarah knew then the game had begun, and she, the woman who once thought she was nothing more than an invisible maid, was now entangled in a world where love and danger beat within the same heartbeat. Outside, the city still shimmered like a crown. Inside her, another light flickered fragile yet alive hope that he hadn't truly recognized her. Or worse, that he had known all along and was only pretending not to. The next morning, the city was wrapped in a thin mist like the breath of memory itself. Sarah sat in the small staff lounge, both hands cupping a cold cup of tea, her gaze lost in the fogged window pane. She hadn't slept. Liam's words still echoed in her mind. "I don't tolerate betrayal." The way he said it, calm, steady, carried the weight of a blade pressed against her throat. Sarah knew that for men like Liam Anderson, trust was the most expensive currency, and betrayal, the one crime that could never be forgiven. But what about her? She had never meant to betray him. She only hid to survive, hid to protect the fragile peace she was clinging to for herself and for the child she carried. The door swung open suddenly, pulling her back to the present. "Sarah," Mrs. Norris said sharply, "Mr. Anderson wants to see you in his office, now." Her tone left no room for refusal. Sarah stood heart-pounding. She took a deep breath, straightened her uniform, and stepped into the private elevator. That elevator, a polished steel box, always made her feel trapped, as though she were being swallowed whole by his world, a place gleaming with light where everything was perfect. And there was no way out. The door slid open. Morning sunlight filled Liam's study. The curtains were drawn back, and a breeze played with the sheer gray drapes. He stood by the bookshelf, white shirt sleeves rolled up and carved in quiet focus. The light caught the silver of his watch, sharp and cold as a knife. "Sit," he said without turning. Sarah obeyed, lowering herself into the chair across from his desk. On the table lay a neat stack of folders, several envelopes, and her name. Her employee file. The blood drained from her face. What do you need from me?" Liam finally looked up, his steel gray eyes cool, assessing. "I was reviewing staff records, and I found something interesting." He ran a finger slowly down the page. Sarah Lawson, 26, born in Seattle, dropped out of college, studied economics, no criminal record, no debt. But he stopped. His eyes locked onto hers. "Your previous address doesn't exist, and your listed reference, Elena Brooks, has no record in any system." Sarah's fingers clenched together. "I must have made a mistake." Liam leaned forward, his voice dropping soft but edged with frost. "You're smarter than that, Sarah. Don't insult me." The air between them thickened, heavy with tension. She could feel every beat of her heart. Then, unexpectedly, he pushed back his chair and walked around behind her. "Someone once told me," he murmured close enough for her to feel his breath, "every lie is born to protect a truth too painful to face." Sarah turned slightly, meeting his eyes. What she saw there wasn't anger. It was something else, something conflicted almost. Human. "I want to believe," he said softly, "that you have your reasons. But if you won't tell me, I'll find them myself." She opened her mouth, voice trembling. "Mr. Anderson, Liam," he interrupted, his tone rougher now. "When it's just us, call me Liam." The sudden intimacy caught her off guard. He was still watching her, his eyes strangely gentle, as if he didn't know why he needed to hear his own name from her lips. "Yes, Liam," she whispered. A silence as thin as glass fell between them. "Do you know what I hate most?" he asked quietly. Sarah shook her head, being looked at with fear. He moved away, walking toward the window, staring out at the flow of cars below. "I was born into fear," he said, his voice distant, almost hollow. "Other people's and my own. I learned to use it, to turn it into power. But sometimes..." He gave a faint smile, weary, sad, and strangely fragile. "Sometimes I just want someone to look at me without trembling." Sarah didn't speak. For the first time, the man the world called cold looked unbearably lonely. "Liam," she said quietly, "I'm not afraid of you." He turned sharply, eyes narrowing. "You're lying." "No," she said, and surprised herself with how steady her voice sounded. "I'm afraid of what you can do, but not of you." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Fleeting, dangerous, heartbreakingly human. You have no idea what you just said, Sarah. Maybe not. But I know this sometimes what people need isn't fear. It's someone brave enough to look them in the eye. He stepped closer, too close, until she could feel the warmth of his breath brush her skin. I don't know who you really are, he whispered. But if you make me feel like this, I have to find out. His hand lifted, hovering just inches from her cheek, then stopped suspended as if the slightest touch could make the empire he'd built collapse. Sarah didn't move. Their eyes met the silence so thick she could hear both their hearts beating. Then the phone rang. Both flinched. Liam dropped his hand, turned away, and answered with his usual composure. Send the files to Chicago by 3. I'll sign them. When he hung up, Sarah was already standing. I should get back to work. No, he said softer now. Take the day off. I'll have someone drive you home. I can go myself. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fine. But remember, Sarah. His voice dropped quiet but commanding. Don't make me come looking for you. That afternoon, Sarah walked along the Hudson, wind biting through her coat. She tried to calm herself, but she could still feel his eyes as if an invisible thread tied them together. She knew she couldn't hide forever. He was getting closer to the truth, not just through logic, but through instinct, that deadly sixth sense born from surviving danger. And yet what scared her more wasn't discovery. It was the strange feeling growing inside her, something that whispered she didn't want to hide anymore. Part of her longed for him to know. The other part feared that when he did, everything would crumble. That night, back in their small Brooklyn apartment, Lily was waiting 2 mugs of hot cocoa steaming on the table. You saw him again? Lily asked. Sarah nodded, recounting the conversation, her voice faltering when she mentioned the lighter. Sarah, Lily said, frowning. He's not an ordinary man. If he finds out, I know, Sarah interrupted softly, but with quiet resolve. But Lily, there's something about him. Something not like the stories. Lily stared. Don't tell me you're starting to... No, Sarah shook her head quickly. I'm not that foolish. When I look into his eyes, I see pain. Real pain. Like he's lost someone. Lily exhaled. His pain doesn't make him less dangerous, Sarah. It just makes him dangerous in a different way. That sentence clung to Sarah all night. Lying awake, she stared at the ceiling, her hand resting on her stomach, feeling the faint rhythm of life within. If one day you learn who your father is, she whispered, will you hate me for it? Somewhere high above in his penthouse of glass and silence, Liam too was awake. He sat alone in the dark, a half-finished glass of whiskey by his side. The silver lighter lay in his palm, its small flame flickering against his face, illuminating a faint scar along his jaw, a trace of a past no one dared to speak of. His gaze was distant, unfocused. I can't stand betrayal, he murmured to the empty room, voice rough. But if it's you, Sarah. He exhaled, the flame quivering. I honestly don't know what I'd do. He snapped the lighter shut, plunging the room into silence. Outside, the mist thickened once more, and somewhere in that sleepless city, 2 souls moved deeper into the maze of emotion, where the line between love and destruction was growing dangerously thin. A week had passed since that morning Liam had confronted Sarah in his office. Since then, he hadn't spoken to her directly, but his silence didn't feel like distance, it felt like watching, as if he were waiting, as if he expected her to reveal something without realizing it. Sarah felt it everywhere, in the smallest, sharpest details, the way Marco, Liam's ever-loyal bodyguard, appeared in the hallway at the exact hour she began her shift, the sudden uptick in routine schedule checks, and the look Mrs. Norris gave her whenever she caught Sarah glancing toward the master's study. No one said a word yet. Everyone seemed to know something was happening between her and Liam Anderson, though no one dared name it. That afternoon, rain poured over the city. Sarah was cleaning the west-facing windows when Marco's voice broke through the steady sound of water. Mr. Anderson wants to see you. In the garden. She turned, startled. The garden. It's raining. He doesn't like to wait. Marco's tone was neutral, but his eyes held a warning, not hostility exactly, but something close. Sarah grabbed an umbrella and made her way to the glass-roofed garden that connected the 67th and 68th floors, a strange, tranquil space, where Liam kept shade-loving plants and rare ferns. Under the misty drizzle, soft light reflected off the small pond at the center, casting everything in a dreamlike glow, beautiful but achingly sad. He was standing there. No coat, no guards. Just Liam in a black shirt damp with rain, a dead cigar between his fingers. Sarah stopped beneath the glass canopy, her voice unsteady. "You wanted to see me?" He didn't turn around. "I heard you studied finance once." "Yes, but Then you can help me." He cut her off, voice calm but firm, leaving no room for refusal. "My charity foundation has been leaking information. I need someone to review the data, someone outside my system." Sarah froze. "Why me?" Liam turned, his face carved with the same sharp edges she knew, but tonight there was something different. A trace of fatigue. Something raw. "Because you don't belong to this world, Sarah," he said quietly. His tone made it unclear whether it was a compliment or a curse. She was led to a small room next to the library, a private archive filled with confidential documents. Stacks of ledgers, invoices, bank transfers. Pages that smelled of dust and danger. Liam stood beside her, his gaze following every move she made. "Don't focus on the big numbers," he said. "Look at the small ones, the patterns that repeat. That's where people hide what they don't want found." Sarah nodded, forcing her heartbeat to steady. But every time he leaned close, her breath caught. Not from fear alone, but from something else entirely. Something unnamed, forbidden. After a while, Liam left to take a call, and Sarah was alone with the papers. She exhaled, sat down, and tried to concentrate. But the lines of numbers blurred, pulsing with the rhythm of her pulse. Then she noticed something strange. A series of small, anonymous wire transfers to an account labeled MR, all drawn from the Anderson Children's Fund. Each transfer was just a few $1,000s, but they repeated every week over the past 3 months. She opened another file. Same dates, same amounts, same signature. Not Liam's, but someone else's. Marco. Her blood ran cold. Marco, the silent shadow who followed Liam everywhere, was funneling money out of the foundation. Sarah carefully replaced the documents just as Liam returned. He glanced at her. "Find anything?" She hesitated. "No. Just a few inconsistencies." He studied her for several seconds, long enough for her to wonder if he could hear her heart pounding. Then he nodded slowly. "Good. I trust you." The words cut both ways, comforting and terrifying all at once. That night, Sarah returned to the small Brooklyn apartment. Lily had been away for days, leaving the space unnervingly quiet. Sarah switched on the light, set her bag down, and sat motionless. What was she supposed to do now? Tell Liam and risk Marco's disappearance. Stay silent and carry another secret alone. She had promised herself she'd stay out of his world, away from its shadows. Yet somehow, fate kept pulling her in one layer at a time. Outside, the rain fell harder. She thought of Liam's eyes when he said, "I trust you." There had been no calculation in them, only the weary look of a man relearning how to believe in something. She pressed a hand against her belly where a faint, steady life rested. "My love," she whispered. "We've gone too far, haven't we?" The next morning, the penthouse felt different. Mrs. Norris approached her quietly. "Something's happened." Mr. Anderson called Marco into his office. "The door's been closed for over an hour." Sarah froze. 10 minutes later, Marco emerged. His expression was unreadable, blank, almost serene. But his eyes, dark and dangerous. As he passed her, he stopped just for a heartbeat. "You know more than you should," he murmured. "And believe me, in this house, the most dangerous person isn't me." Then he walked away, leaving her shaken to the core. That afternoon, Liam appeared in the hallway. "Sarah, come with me." His voice gave nothing away. She followed him into the elevator, silence pressing around them like glass. When the doors opened, they were on the rooftop, wind sweeping across the terrace, carrying the scent of rain and sea salt. The city glittered below a universe of light. Liam turned, hands in his pockets, half in shadow. "What did you find?" Sarah said nothing. He stepped closer. "You're smart, Sarah, but you don't know how to play this game. You think I'm lying to you?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. I think you're hiding something. And the worst part is, it makes me want to keep you closer. She froze. Keep me because you make me forget who's friend and who's enemy. He gave a small, bitter laugh. For the first time in years, I want to trust someone, and that terrifies me. Sarah looked up at him and saw at the fracture behind his cold facade. The crack in a man who had spent years surviving on suspicion, now trembling before the simplest thing of all feeling. She whispered, Sometimes fear is just proof you're still capable of love. He gave a soft, hoarse laugh like gravel mixed with smoke. And you, Sarah, do you even know how to love? She opened her mouth, but his phone rang. He answered and his expression changed instantly. Get the car ready, now. His tone was sharp. He turned to her voice low and urgent. Stay here, don't leave this floor. What's going on? Someone just sent me a photo. He paused, eyes darkening. A photo of you. Sarah, in the archive room. Her breath hitched. That's impossible. His gaze softened for a moment, almost painfully gentle. If they touch you, I'll kill them all. Then he turned and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. Sarah stood alone on the rooftop, wind tearing through her hair. The city glittered beneath her dazzling distant cold, and over the roar of the wind she whispered to herself, Liam, you have no idea. I've been in this game far longer than you think. Meanwhile, in the shadows of a black SUV leaving the building, Marco stared at his phone, at the photo of Sarah displayed on the screen alongside an anonymous message. She's not just a maid. His eyes flickered sorrow, then ice. He deleted the picture, shut off the phone. Outside, rain began to fall again. A storm was coming, and this time none of them would walk away without scars. Rain had fallen over New York for 3 straight days, heavy, relentless thick as the air before a real storm. Sarah hadn't seen Liam since the night he'd stormed out of the tower. The only news came through Mrs. Norris, who mentioned quietly that he was at the Hamptons estate, the seaside mansion he only visited when something serious had happened. She tried to go about her duties as usual, but the subtle glances from security guards made it impossible to relax. There was something strange in the air, a silent vigilance that filled every corner of the penthouse, as if everyone were waiting for an explosion. On the 4th night, the intercom rang while she was cleaning the kitchen. Marco's voice came through deep and rough like the rain outside. Pack your things. We're going to the Hamptons. The boss wants you. Sarah froze, her heart skipping hard against her ribs. Now. The drive took 2 hours through the freezing night. Marco sat in the front, silent, unreadable. Sarah stared out the window, the city lights fracturing in the rain. She didn't ask questions. Somehow instinct told her that this time nothing would be the same again. When the car turned down a narrow coastal road, the air grew thick with salt and storm. The Hamptons mansion appeared through the fog, a vast white structure motionless and cold, as if it had been abandoned for years. Marco opened her door. Go in, he's waiting. Liam was standing by the fireplace, flames burning bright against the storm outside. He wore a gray shirt, the sleeves rolled up, a faint streak of dried blood still visible along his wrist. Sarah stopped at the threshold. You're hurt, she blurted, then regretted it when he met her eyes. It's nothing, he said quietly. But something else is. He threw a folder onto the table, papers scattered and among them a few blurred photographs. One of them was her. Sarah went still. In the photo, she was standing in the archive room, holding a file marked MR. You've been following me? She whispered. No. His voice dropped lower. But someone else has, and sent these to my company's internal inbox with a message that read, She's not just a maid. The air between them seemed to vanish. You think I betrayed you? She asked, her voice trembling. She couldn't tell if it was from fear or anger. I don't know, Liam said. For the first time, he didn't sound like a man in control, just a man who was tired. I only know you're hiding something. He stepped closer, each footfall on the wooden floor echoing through her chest. Sarah, if you want money, I can give it. If you want safety, I can guarantee it. But don't make me choose between trusting you and protecting what I've built with blood. You think I came here for money? Her voice cracked. You know nothing about me, Liam. She turned away, tears slipping down without sound. The world you call yours, it's the same world that killed my mother. One offshore account, one fake transaction. I saw the name Anderson Logistics in the report. Do you know what that feels like? When one day they tell you your father killed himself over debt, and your mother dies from the grief a week later? I didn't come here to destroy you. I came here to find the truth. The room turned cold as the sea outside. Liam froze, color draining from his face. After a moment, he stepped forward, gripping her shoulders. Voice rough. Sarah, what are you saying? I'm saying my father was an accountant for one of Anderson's satellite companies. A year later, he was gone. His files disappeared. My mother followed soon after. All I had left were questions, and now I think you might be the answer. Liam's hands fell away. A moment later, he laughed softly, a sound so empty it hurt to hear. If you think I killed your parents, why stay? Why work for me? Why live every day in fear? Her eyes met his, pain mixed with defiance. Because I needed to know. And because when I met you, you weren't the monster I expected. They stood still, the crackle of fire filling the silence. For a brief, fragile moment, hatred and longing blurred into one. Liam stepped closer. His voice was a whisper. You're wrong about one thing, Sarah. No one killed your parents. But maybe I let it happen. Her breath caught. He continued, eyes distant. 5 years ago, one of my subsidiaries was used to launder money by another organization. I found out too late. The man blamed for it my employee was silenced before he could speak. Later, I discovered the name Lawson buried in old files, an accountant who vanished. I didn't know. He was your father. His voice broke slightly. If I had known sooner, things would have been different. Sarah stared at him through the shimmer of heat from the fire. You're telling the truth. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into the desk drawer and pulled out another file, tossing it onto the table. Inside were faded investigation reports and a photo of a middle-aged man. Her father. Her throat tightened. How long have you kept this 5 years? Why? Because I owed that man, he said quietly. And now, maybe I owe you. Something shifted in the air between them. Sarah sat down, hands trembling as she turned the pages. Every detail matched what she remembered. She didn't know whether to believe him or to keep holding on to the hatred that had kept her alive. Liam took the seat across from her. His face looked drawn, weary, but the distance between them had vanished. You can leave tonight, he said softly. I'll give you everything you need to start over. She looked up, eyes searching his. And you, I'll finish what's left of this story. Her voice was barely a whisper. If I leave, you won't have anyone left to trust. I'm used to that. The words hurt more than she expected. Rain battered against the glass like shrapnel. Sarah stood and walked toward him. You said you hate betrayal, she murmured. But have you ever thought, maybe betrayal is just another word for survival? He lifted his gaze, a faint light flickering in his eyes, fragile human. Are you trying to tell me something, Sarah? No. She smiled faintly. I just want you to understand I didn't stay because of hatred. He rose slowly, said nothing, and brushed his fingers against her cheek. She didn't pull away. For the first time, neither of them was wearing a mask. Then why, he whispered. Sarah's answer trembled on her lips. Because no matter how hard I try to deny it, I still believe there's a part of you, a part you've spent years trying to kill, that's still good. Liam stared at her for a long time. Then silently, he pulled her into his arms. The waves outside crashed like 1,000 unspoken words, dissolving into the rain. Marco entered at that exact moment. He stopped, startled, then cleared his throat. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. Someone breached the estate's security system. They know Sarah's here. Liam released her, his expression hardening in an instant. Get the car. Take her to the safe room in the basement. What are you going to do? Sarah asked, panic creeping into her voice. Deal with whoever came for you. She grabbed his hand. Liam, you don't have to. He cut her off. Voice rough but resolute. It's time I protect what I should have protected from the start. Outside, the rain came harder thunder rumbling over the coast. In a flash of lightning, Sarah saw his silhouette vanish down the corridor, tall, solitary, unyielding. As if he already knew the road he was walking might not have a return. And for the first time, she felt truly afraid, not of her secret being exposed, but of the one fear that comes with loving a dangerous man, that he might never come back. The storm hit at midnight. Wind lashed against the glass walls, and sheets of rain tore across the sea like claws. Sarah sat in the safe room beneath the mansion, its yellow light flickering over cold tiles. Marco locked the steel door, his face drawn tight. "I need to know what's happening," she said. Her voice trembled not from cold but from fear. He didn't answer right away. For a moment, he just listened to the waves crashing beyond the concrete walls, before saying quietly, "Someone knows who you are, Sarah, and if they know, they'll use you to get to him." A chill ran down her spine. "Who are they?" "No one knows for sure," he said, but the one who sent that picture wasn't an outsider. It came from someone inside. Someone who used to be close to Liam. Sarah fell silent. Marco's words cracked something inside her, as if a hidden pit had opened beneath her feet, separating her from Liam's world, a place where even loyalty could bleed. Around 3 a.m., the door burst open. Liam stood there, soaked through his shirt, spattered with mud and blood. Sarah sprang up, running toward him. "You're hurt!" He didn't answer, just placed a cold hand on her shoulder. His eyes were steady, burning with exhaustion. "It's done," he said. "No one will touch you again." It sounded like a promise and a curse. Marco approached cautiously. "Boss, the men—" "Handle it," Liam cut him off, his voice hoarse. "No traces." The two men exchanged a look of grim understanding. Sarah's stomach twisted. Relief and dread collided sad inside her. She was safe, but safety in Liam's world was always bought with blood. When Marco left, Liam sank into the chair across from her. His face was pale drawn, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked. The question struck her still. She shook her head slowly. "I'm afraid of your world, but not of you." He gave a faint, joyless smile. "No one's ever said that to me without shaking." She met his gaze. "That's because you've never let anyone see the man behind the armor, Liam." For a moment, he said nothing. The firelight danced over his face, highlighting the loneliness carved into his features. "You have no idea what I've done to keep what I have," he said, voice low and rough. "Trust is a luxury." "Love?" He paused, eyes darkening. "Love is the most dangerous thing of all." "Dangerous," she whispered. "Because when you love someone," he said quietly, "you lose the instinct to pull the trigger." The room went silent. Sarah lowered her gaze, fingers twisting together. Deep down, she knew he wasn't threatening her. He was confessing. A gust of wind made the lights flicker. She rose and poured him a drink. He accepted it, barely sipped, and set the glass down. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "They won't stop. They don't want money, they want you. Because you know something, even if you don't realize it yet." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" Liam opened a cabinet and pulled out a black envelope, sliding it toward her. "Your father's records mention a man named Richard Hale. He was Anderson Logistics' legal counsel before he disappeared, with every piece of data tied to the case. Tonight, I found out he reached out to one of my contacts to sell information, and your name was in it." Sarah stared at him, stunned. "My name?" "Yes." His voice dropped. "Because you're not just the daughter of an accountant. You're the only person alive who holds the decryption key to the accounts they used for the laundering." She staggered back, pulse hammering. "That's impossible. I never—" "Not intentionally," he interrupted. "But your father used a private coding system. You saw it, you read it, you remembered it even if you didn't understand it. And they believe I'm hiding you." Sarah collapsed into the chair, dizzy. Everything she'd believed, the grief, the guilt, the hiding, was part of something far bigger and far more dangerous. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. Liam closed his eyes for a moment, then said, "I'm sending you out of the country. Italy. You'll be safe there. I'll follow when I can." "No." She shook her head, tears spilling. "You can't stay here alone." He smiled faintly and brushed his fingers against her cheek. You forget, Sarah? I was born in the dark. But you're the only thing that reminds me light still exists. She gripped his hand. Then come with me. If you stay, I won't go. Their eyes met the air between them, electric, fragile. For a heartbeat, the world beyond the walls, the storm, the danger, the blood disappeared. There was only them. Before he could answer, Liam's phone rang. Marco's voice crackled through urgent. Boss, we've got a problem. Richard Hale is dead. Police are on their way. Liam's eyes snapped open. Dead, 2 shots to the chest. A witness saw a woman leaving the scene. Sarah's breath froze. Who, Liam demanded. Marco hesitated, then spoke slowly. Elena Lawson. Silence fell like a blade. Sarah stumbled backward, gripping the table for balance. No, that's impossible. Elena would never. Liam's tone was quiet, careful. Are you sure she's my cousin? She saved me, hid me. And maybe, he said, voice tightening, she knows more than you think. Richard's dead. The police will trace his last contact. If they get to Elena, they'll get to you. Sarah's voice trembled. You're not going to hand her over. Are you? He said nothing. His eyes stayed cold, but something fragile cracked beneath the surface. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Marco returned a duffel bag and 2 passports in hand. Car's ready, he said. Police are closing in. If you're going, it has to be now. Liam turned to Sarah. You have 2 choices. Trust me or stay and face this alone. Her heart felt split in 2. Elena, her last family. Liam, the man she had just begun to trust. And perhaps love. You promise? She whispered, tears glistening. If I go with you, you won't hurt her? He didn't answer at first. Then finally he nodded. I promise. She stepped closer, pressing a trembling hand to his chest, feeling the thud of his heart beneath the damp fabric. Then I'll trust you. He clasped her hand, his voice firm but low. Don't look back. As the car sped away from the mansion, Sarah looked out the window. The reflection of red and blue lights flashed across the rain-slick glass. Beside her, Liam sat in silence, eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. Are you sure we'll be safe? She asked softly. No, he said after a pause. But at least, you won't be alone. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Outside, the rain fell harder, washing away every trace of what they'd left behind. And in the vast darkness ahead, 2 fugitives carried a single secret one born of love, the other of guilt, as the real storm waited for them just beyond the rain. Dawn was breaking when Liam's car stopped beside a quiet lake on the outskirts of New Jersey. Mist hung over the water, and the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, falling across Sarah's pale, exhausted face, her eyes still bright, clinging to a fragile sense of peace amid the chaos. Where are we? She asked hoarsely after the long night of running. A safe house, Liam said, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. No one will find you here, at least for a few days. He shut off the engine and stepped out. Gone was the crisp suit and commanding aura of the Mafia king. What remained was a man, weary, unguarded shoulders, damp with dew, caught between exhaustion and resolve. Sarah followed him out, breathing in deeply. The air was different here, laced with pine earth and the distant sound of morning birds. For the first time in months, she could actually breathe. The cabin by the lake was small, only 2 rooms, the wood aged but warm. Liam lit a fire and handed her a cup of tea. She accepted it, her hands trembling. Thank you. He sat across from her, eyes fixed steady. Sarah, I need you to tell me the truth, everything you know about Elena. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Elena was the only one who knew I survived the accident. She promised to help me uncover what really happened to my parents. 3 months ago, she sent me a hard drive. She said it contained something he'll need when the time comes. But when I opened it, it was just a coded string, something I couldn't decipher. Liam leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, his eyes clouded with thought. That code? Do you still have it? She nodded, pulling out a small USB drive hanging from the chain around her neck. It's here. He took it, turning it over in his hand. That's why they've been hunting you, he said quietly. And why Elena had to disappear. Sarah's voice trembled. You think she killed Richard Hale? Liam shook his head. No, I think she's being framed to look like she did. His words settled over her like a fragile light breaking through the dark. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. They sat by the fire saying nothing. The room filled only with the sound of crackling wood. She studied him the way the flames carved shadows across his face. Whether in darkness or light, that gaze carried the same sorrow, the sorrow of a man who had lost too much to believe in anything pure. Liam, she said softly, you never told me why you trust me. He smiled faintly, a wistful smile that vanished as quickly as it came. Because that first night you brought me coffee, you looked at me without fear. Everyone else saw a monster, but you didn't. And I couldn't stop wondering, why? She lowered her eyes, whispering, because I saw a man who wanted to be forgiven. Their eyes met across the flickering light. No more questions, no more lies. Just quiet understanding. He reached out fingertips, brushing her cheek. The warmth of his touch made her forget to breathe. I've lived too long surrounded by blood and lies, he said, his voice rough low. But when you look at me like that, I start to believe I can be someone else. And if one day I stop looking at you that way, she asked softly, then I'll remember that once there was someone who believed in me, even when I couldn't. Her heart ached at his words. She didn't know if it was fear or love, only that in that moment the world outside ceased to exist. By noon, Liam was at the computer. He plugged in the USB. Lines of indecipherable symbols filled the screen. Then suddenly a single image appeared. A man in a gray suit shaking hands with her father. Sarah froze. That's Vincent Marrow, Liam said darkly. He was my partner and the one who betrayed me. 5 years ago, he dumped the blame for our operations on his subordinates to wash himself clean. Your father was forced to sign a false confession. When he tried to expose it, Marrow had him silenced. Sarah's breath caught tears welling up. Why didn't you stop him? Liam looked down, his voice raw. Because I was fool enough to believe he was my friend. By dusk, cold wind swept through the cabin. Sarah stood by the lake, her hair whipping around her face, her tears blending with the mist. Liam came up behind her and draped his jacket over her shoulders. I'll find him, he said quietly, and end this. No, she said, gripping his hand. You've had enough blood on your hands. Let the law. The law can't touch him, Liam cut in sharply. Because he is the law now. He owns the courts, the money, the men I once called brothers. Her voice shook. Then what will you sacrifice to bring him down? This isn't about revenge, he said, his eyes locked on hers. It's about setting you free. Night fell. Inside, the only light came from the dying fire. Sarah sat at the wooden table, writing quickly in her notebook. Liam stood behind her, reading the words over her shoulder. If one day you forget why you're fighting, remember I saw you. Not the monster the world feared, but the man brave enough to love in hell. He rested a hand on her shoulder. What are you writing? Just something in case we don't see each other again. He caught her wrist gently, his voice hoarse. Don't talk like I'm already gone. You're walking into a place no one ever comes back from. I've already been to hell, Sarah, he said, leaning closer. But I've never had a reason to come back. Until you. The kiss came naturally, slow, deep, tender, like the first breath after a storm. It wasn't about desire, but about a promise neither of them dared to speak aloud. She felt his heartbeat sync with hers, two broken souls, finally finding each other in the silence. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers and whispered, Tomorrow I'll go. She shook her head. You can't leave me. I'm not leaving forever. But if I don't do this, there will never be a tomorrow for us. Promise you'll come back. He looked into her eyes. I promise. At dawn, Sarah woke to an empty cabin. On the table lay his silver lighter engraved with L.A., and a note in his bold, unmistakable handwriting. Don't be afraid. The light only comes when the storm has passed. And I'm going to find that dawn for us. Sarah sat there for a long time, holding the lighter in her trembling hands. Outside, the mist began to fade. The lake shimmered faintly in the rising sun. She whispered, Liam, even if you don't come back, I'll wait. Because love born in darkness can only survive through faith. And somewhere far away through streets bathed in rain and gunfire, Liam Anderson. The man who once lived like a ghost walked on carrying a flicker of light inside his chest. It was no longer the flame of vengeance, but the flame of a promise. In the haze of smoke and storm, he struck the silver lighter open. The blue flame burned steady and quiet, small but fierce. And it was enough to guide him home. The New York sky was a muted gray, a morning without rain, yet heavy with damp air. On the rooftop of an abandoned building in Brooklyn, Liam stood alone. The neon glow from distant billboards painted faint colors across his face. Firm, controlled, but his eyes held a fragile shadow. At his feet lay a map, a gun and a phone playing the morning news. Richard Hale has been confirmed dead after a shooting in Manhattan. Police are currently pursuing the main suspect, Elena Lawson, a woman previously connected to the Anderson Logistics Underground network. He turned off the device. The whistling wind across rusted steel sounded almost like an accusation. The darkness of his past was returning, and this time, it wasn't just coming for his power. It was coming for the woman he loved. At the lakeside cabin, Sarah couldn't stay still. She'd been counting every hour since Liam left. Every creak of the floorboards, every sound beyond the door made her heart jolt. Beside her lay the silver lighter, the only trace he left behind. She kept telling herself he'd come back, just as he promised. But faith, no matter how beautiful, couldn't always quiet the fear that grew louder with every hour of silence. She tried her phone, no signal. Outside, a misty drizzle began to fall, veiling the lake in gray. The world was so still, she could almost hear her own heartbeat. Near noon, a black SUV pulled up at the gate. Sarah ran out, hope flashing in her chest. But the man who stepped out was Marco. He looked exhausted with a streak of dried blood on his cheek. "Where is he?" she demanded, voice breaking. Marco hesitated for a moment, then said quietly, "I was ordered to get you to a safer location. He's meeting with Vincent Marrow. He went alone. He doesn't trust anyone else." Sarah shook her head, tears rising. "No, he promised he'd come back." Marco stepped closer, voice soft but firm. "Sarah, if you really want to help him, then don't stay here. Liam's doing this to keep you alive. If you stay, everything he's fighting for will mean nothing." An hour later, the SUV left the lake behind. As the city skyline reappeared through the mist, Marco said quietly, "Vincent set the meeting at the Pier 43 warehouse. He wants a trade the USB for your life." Sarah's stomach turned. "You mean he knows I'm alive?" Marco nodded. "We're out of time. But Liam won't hand you over. He'll end this himself." She turned toward the window, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't understand. If he dies, I don't have a life to save." At Pier 43, cold wind tore across the Hudson. The warehouse was empty except for flickering lights and the sound of water slapping against concrete. Vincent Marrow stood at the center, his black suit immaculate. A familiar smile on his lips, the kind that once fooled men into calling him friend. "Liam," he said smoothly. "You came. Alone. Touching." Liam stepped from the shadows, the USB glinting in his hand. "Enough talk." "What do you want?" Vincent chuckled. "Just one thing. The girl, Sarah Lawson." "Never." You know, Vincent drawled, "Loyalty is a curious thing. You once claimed you trusted no one yet. Here you are undone by a girl's eyes." Liam said nothing. Vincent's grin widened. "She's your downfall, Liam. Hand her over and I'll let you live. Let her go, just like you let everything else go." Liam's voice was cold, steady. "You're wrong. Sarah isn't my weakness. She's the reason I'm still standing." Vincent scoffed. "How poetic. Pity that reason will be the death of you." The first shot rang out. A bullet sliced the air, grazing Liam's shoulder. He staggered but didn't fall, firing back in one clean motion. The warehouse erupted in chaos, gunfire splintering metal. Echoing roars of impact, muzzle flashes lit the darkness like lightning. Vincent ducked behind a container, laughing through the smoke. "Does she know how many you killed to build your kingdom, Liam? You think she'll still love you after that?" Liam pulled the trigger, his voice cutting through the noise. "She doesn't have to love a saint, only a man trying to be better." Another explosion shook the floor. A container crashed down steel, shrieking. Liam moved through the haze, gun raised until he stood face to face with Vincent. Vincent smirked. "Do it. Pull the trigger." "Be me." Liam's eyes blazed. "That's where we differ." "I know when to stop." He fired not at the chest, but the leg. Vincent screamed, collapsing to the ground. "The cops are already coming," Liam said, tossing his gun aside. "This time you won't walk away." Outside, Marco's SUV screeched to a halt near the docks. Before he could react, Sarah threw open the door and ran into the rain. Her footsteps echoed across the concrete, matching the pounding of her heart. "Liam." The warehouse doors burst open, and there he was, blood on his shoulder chest rising and falling, but still standing. "You didn't listen," he rasped, voice soft yet full of relief. She broke into tears, running straight into his arms. "I couldn't just sit there while you faced him alone." He tried to speak, but she pressed her hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and alive. "You're still here," she whispered. "That's all that matters." In the distance, sirens wailed. Marco appeared at the door, gesturing urgently. "We need to move, now." Liam grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her along. Behind them, flashing lights painted the wet walls in red and blue. They ran through the pier, breath ragged, their shadows melting into the fog. From the bridge above, Sarah looked back. Police swarmed the docks, and Vincent Merrow was being handcuffed, his face twisted in rage and disbelief. She turned to Liam, her voice trembling. "Do you regret it?" He shook his head. "No, because for once, I chose right." The sky began to clear. Their car stopped at a cliff overlooking the sea. The horizon burned with pink and gold, the first sunrise after too many nights of darkness. Sarah sat on the hood beside him, resting her head against his shoulder. "You kept your word," she murmured. "Dawn's here." He smiled faintly. "Dawn's only beautiful when there's someone to see it with." She turned to him. "And if the world turns dark again tomorrow?" "Then I'll find the light again," he said, placing a hand over her heart. "Here." In that moment, there was no past, no blood, no darkness. Only two people who had been broken by the world, yet somehow found each other again. The morning wind swept across them, carrying the scent of salt and sunlight. Sarah closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat, the sound of a man who once swore he could never love until he met her. And there, at the fragile border between night and day, they finally understood their love was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to survive, to outlast the darkness, and to touch the light. 1 year later. Early summer in New York had never looked so bright. The sky was soft blue, crystal clear. Along the Hudson River, the breeze carried the scent of salt and memory. Sarah stood by the tall glass window of her art studio, gazing at the photograph that had become the soul of the room, the first picture she'd ever taken with Liam. He was turned slightly to the side, a faint smile on his lips, but his eyes calm, steady, held a peace he'd never known before. Behind her came the sound of laughter. "Mommy, look, I finished the butterfly." She turned. A little girl about 4 years old ran toward her, clutching a colorful paper painting. Curly brown hair, storm gray eyes, so much like him. Sarah smiled, kneeling down to embrace her. "It's beautiful, Hope, just like a real butterfly." "Mommy," the girl asked seriously, "when will Daddy come back?" That question, no matter how many times she heard it, still stung like the first. Sarah brushed the child's hair gently, her voice as soft as wind. "Daddy's watching us, sweetie. Just from a little farther away." Hope nodded wide-eyed, full of belief, the kind that only a child untouched by loss could still hold. Sarah lifted her up, looking again at the photograph. Liam Anderson, the man the world had once feared, and yet the gentlest soul she'd ever known. A man whose presence alone made her brave enough to love. It had been a year since that night at Pier 43. Since Vincent Merrow vanished from the city and Liam from her life. Police found traces of an explosion, twisted metal, and a silver lighter engraved with LA. The news declared him dead, but Sarah never believed it. Because on their last night together, he had said, "If I live, I'll come back when the world no longer threatens you. But if I don't live, as if I'm watching you every day." And she did. When everything was over, Sarah left New York for a while. She took Hope to Vermont, where winters blanketed the forests white and no one cared who you once were. There she opened a small cafe called The Lighthouse. Locals nicknamed it the Place of Light. In the quiet afternoons, she would tell Hope stories about a good man who had once lost his way and how he learned to believe in kindness again. And whenever Hope asked Mommy, does love last forever, Sarah always answered, if it's real, it never disappears. It just changes shape, sometimes into sunlight, sometimes into wind. One June morning, as Sarah prepared to open the cafe, the doorbell chimed. A man stepped in, long brown coat hat pulled low. "Excuse me," he said, voice low and rough. "I'm looking for the owner." Sarah looked up and froze. That voice. The man removed his hat. Time could alter a face, but not those eyes, gray deep and gentle, as if he'd never truly left her dreams. She stood motionless. The world seemed to hold its breath. "Liam." He paused for a heartbeat, then smiled faintly. "I promised I'd come back when Dawn arrived, didn't I?" She stepped toward him, her hand trembling as it touched his face, afraid he might vanish like a memory. "I thought I'd lost you." "I thought so too," he said softly. "But maybe the only thing I couldn't lose was you." They stood there in silence, the soft sound of rain falling just beyond the porch. Then Sarah broke down, tears spilling, as she wrapped her arms around him. All the waiting, the pain, the unspoken hope melting into his embrace. He whispered near her ear, "I lived because I had a promise to keep. I'm not the same man anymore, Sarah. I left everything behind. Anderson Logistics now belongs to the charity I founded, Hope Foundation." She looked up, smiling through her tears. "Hope, because you once told me that real light begins with faith." She laughed quietly, then led him toward the window, where a small girl stood watching, eyes wide with wonder. "Hope," she called softly, "this is a friend of Mommy's." The child tilted her head, studying him, then smiled. "Are you the man from Mommy's stories?" Liam knelt down, his throat tightening at the sound of her voice. "Maybe I am." Hope extended her tiny hand. "Then you're not a stranger anymore." He took her hand in his and felt warmth rush through him, a feeling he thought he'd never have again. That evening, the three of them sat together on the porch. The sky was filled with stars. In Liam's hand was the same old lighter, now worn with time. "You kept it all this time?" she asked. "I almost threw it away," he said, voice low. "But then I realized even the smallest flame can still light the way for someone lost." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. Life would never be perfect. But in that moment, with Hope's laughter, the wind, and the soft glow of twilight, it was enough. A week later, the local paper ran a headline, "Hope Foundation opens to support children orphaned by financial crimes." The cover photo showed Liam cutting the ribbon while Sarah stood behind him, holding Hope. Below it was his quote, "No one is born perfect, but everyone can choose just once to do the right thing." That afternoon, Sarah closed the cafe early. She sat by the window and began writing their stories, not of power or vengeance, but of two people who walked through hell just to remember how to love. Her final line trembled onto the page. "If anyone ever asks me what true love is, I'll say it's when you dare to believe even when every part of you is afraid." She set down the pen, looking outside. Liam was in the yard playing with Hope. Their laughter drifted on the wind. The setting sun poured over his shoulders, golden and warm, and for a moment it felt as though dawn had touched the earth once more. If you've ever walked through your darkest days, remember the light is still waiting. You only need the courage to open your heart again. True love isn't perfect. It isn't loud, but it's always there, patient, gentle, and willing to wait. Share this story if you believe someone out there still needs a reason to believe in something good. Because sometimes just one person's faith is enough to save another heart.